They thought they owned my money, my decisions, and my future, so I bought a car. What happened next? Pure, unadulterated family rage you won't believe. My dad tried to ambush me at my own door, screaming about how my new car made him look after he secretly tried to obligate me to his business loan. This isn't just about a car, it's about breaking free from a toxic family that tried to weaponize guilt and social media to control my life. I, 26M, didn't plan on buying a car this year. It wasn't even on my list. What I planned was to keep saving quietly and stay out of family finances completely, because every time money comes up in my house, it turns into a weird mix of guilt, competition, and people keeping score. For context, my parents don't struggle financially, but they like being seen as the ones who made it work for everyone. My dad runs a small side business that half the family uses for favors, discounts, and free help. My mom manages everyone's schedules, rides, paperwork, and somehow that turned into her thinking she manages people's decisions too. I'm the youngest, which in my family basically means I'm still treated like I'm waiting for permission to be an adult. The trigger for all of this wasn't me saving money. It was my dad telling people I was going to co-sign something I never agreed to. I found out because my phone blew up with messages saying congrats and that's really generous of you and your parents must be so proud. I had no idea what anyone was talking about. Then my cousin messaged me and said my dad told everyone I was going to help him upgrade his work vehicle because business was about to expand. I called my dad and asked him what he was talking about. He said casual like it was already settled. I told them you'd back me on the loan. You're working now, you've got stability. It makes sense. I said, you didn't even ask me. He said, I didn't think I needed to. You live here. You benefit from this family. This is how families move forward. I told him I was not co-signing anything and I wasn't buying anyone a vehicle. He got quiet for a second and then said, so you're fine letting me look stupid in front of everyone. I said, you made yourself look stupid by promising my money without asking. That turned into him saying I didn't understand how business works, that I didn't respect what he'd built, and that I was acting like I was above helping when I finally had something to contribute. My mom jumped in and said I was embarrassing them by backing out after they already talked about it, and that people would think something was wrong with me if I didn't follow through. I told her I didn't care what people thought and that it wasn't my responsibility to support a business I'm not part of. She said, so you can benefit from this family but not invest in it. I said, you don't get to redefine family as a financial contract. After that, the narrative around me shifted fast. My dad stopped talking directly to me and started talking around me. He told relatives I was nervous about commitment and that I didn't want responsibility. My mom told people I was under a lot of pressure and not thinking clearly lately. Suddenly people were checking in on me like I was about to spiral instead of like I'd just said no to a loan. Then the social media stuff started. My mom posted about kids who want independence until it's time to help and parents who build everything and get hesitation in return. My dad started sharing posts about loyalty and sacrifice and how real family doesn't hesitate. None of it mentioned me, but people who know us are not dumb. I started getting messages asking if I was okay, if I was stressed, if work was overwhelming me. One person straight up asked if I was scared of responsibility. That pissed me off. I messaged my mom and said, why are people acting like I'm unstable? She said, I never said that. I just said you're under pressure. I said, stop soft launching stories about me like I'm some kind of problem project. She said, so now I can't talk about my own stress. I told her, your stress is turning into public commentary about me. She left me on read. Then something else happened that really shifted the power dynamic. Someone from my dad's business network contacted me directly and asked if I was ready to proceed with helping secure financing. That means my dad didn't just talk to family. He talked to people who could actually move this forward. I called him and said, why are strangers calling me about your loan? He said, because I told them you were reliable. I said, I told you no. He said, you said you weren't sure. I said I wasn't doing it. He said, you always twist things when you're uncomfortable. That turned into yelling. Actual yelling. He said I was sabotaging him on purpose because I didn't like that he still had authority in the family. I told him I didn't want authority. I wanted autonomy. He said autonomy is what people say when they want to avoid obligation. I told him obligation doesn't mean blank checks. My mom started crying and saying I was tearing the family apart over money. I told her money wasn't the issue, control was. She said I was being dramatic and turning everything into some kind of power struggle. I told her, because it is a power struggle and you're losing control and you hate it. That made everything worse. After that, my dad told people I was acting out and that I was being influenced by coworkers who didn't respect family values. I heard this from someone else, not from him. People started asking if I was planning to move out suddenly, me or if I was going through something. Then, out of nowhere, my mom started being overly nice to me, cooking my favorite food, asking about my day, acting like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, my dad stayed cold and sarcastic, making comments about how I must be too busy planning my future to help the present. It felt like they switched roles, one trying to emotionally soften me up, the other trying to pressure me. Then the car thing happened, but not the way they expected. I didn't buy a car because of them. I bought it because my rides started falling through, my schedule changed, and I got tired of coordinating my life around everyone else's availability. I didn't tell anyone. I just started driving myself. They noticed because my mom asked where I was and I said I'd be back later. She asked how I was getting there. I said I drove. She froze and said, "You bought a car?" I said yes. She immediately said, "So you had money for that but not for helping your father." I said, "This isn't about helping. This is about you deciding what I owe." My dad said, "So you can invest in yourself but not in what built you." I said, "You didn't build me to be your guarantor." That turned into another fight where he said I was selfish, my mom said I was ungrateful, and I said I was tired of being treated like a tool instead of a person. My dad told me I'd regret choosing independence over loyalty. I told him I was already regretting staying silent this long. Then they changed strategies again. My dad stopped arguing and started acting disappointed. My mom started telling people she was worried about how distant I've become. Relatives started asking if I was angry at my parents, if I felt unloved, if I was trying to prove something. I told one of them, I said no to a loan and now everyone's acting like I joined a cult. That got back to my parents too. My mom said I was mocking their concern. I told her their concern looked a lot like damage control. She said I was cruel. I said she was manipulative. She said I was breaking her heart. I said she was weaponizing it. My dad told me I was acting like I was smarter than everyone. I told him, no, I'm acting like my decisions belong to me. He said, not when you still live under this roof. I said, so that's what this is. Rent in the form of obedience. That set him off again. Update 1. I got a call from my uncle in the middle of the morning, the kind of call where he doesn't even ask how I am before launching in. He said my parents were deeply hurt and that me buying a car was being seen as a statement, not a purchase. A statement. According to him, it was a public signal that I didn't care about them anymore and that I was deliberately choosing myself over family. I told him I wasn't running a campaign and I didn't issue press releases for my life decisions. He said, that's a cute way to dodge responsibility, and then added that in his day, real sons made sure their parents were taken care of before upgrading their own comfort. That's when I lost patience. I told him if he wanted to lecture someone, he could start with explaining why my parents couldn't talk to me themselves instead of sending relatives like messengers. I said I wasn't a teenager being grounded through extended family. He went quiet for a second and then said I was disrespectful and aggressive, and that he'd let my parents know I was out of control, which is exactly what they needed, because they escalated immediately. My dad showed up unannounced early the next morning while I was getting ready for work. I opened the door and he was already standing too close, blocking the hallway like this was some kind of checkpoint. He said, "We're dealing with this now." Before I even said hello, he started yelling about how people could see my car parked nearby and how it made him look. He said neighbors, relatives, anyone passing by would assume I thought I was above my own family now. I told him to move away from my door because I didn't have time for this and he didn't get to ambush me. He said, "You don't get to shut me out after what you owe us." That word hit harder than anything else. I told him I didn't owe anyone a vehicle, money, or control over my life, and that showing up like this was completely out of line. He said I crossed the line first by choosing status over loyalty. I told him loyalty doesn't come with invoices. That's when the yelling really started. He called me selfish. I called him controlling. He said I was getting arrogant since earning money. I told him arrogance would be thinking I had the right to decide how other adults spend or expect money. He said I was ungrateful. I told him gratitude doesn't mean surrender. He leaned in and said I was becoming someone nobody would want to rely on. I told him I was tired of being relied on like an asset instead of treated like a person. When he finally left, he made sure to say, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, that I was a disappointment with a steering wheel. I went to work shaking with anger. That afternoon, the situation exploded in a new way. Someone took photos of my car. I don't know who. I don't know when. But suddenly the family WhatsApp group lit up with images of it from different angles. No caption, just pictures. Then the comments started. Must be nice. So parents don't matter anymore? Hope the car keeps you warm since family won't. I stared at my phone for a while before before replying, because I knew once I did, it wouldn't stay calm. I finally wrote, "Stop talking about my money like it's a community fund." That opened the floodgates. A cousin replied that if I wasn't ashamed, I'd help my parents instead of flexing. I told her I wasn't flexing, I was commuting, and if she wanted to contribute to my bills, she was welcome to try. Someone else said I was disrespectful. I told them respect doesn't include surveillance and commentary on my purchases. Another relative said I'd changed. I said no, I just stopped pretending this was normal. The insults kept coming. Selfish, cold, ungrateful, inflated ego. Someone actually wrote that money had rotted me. I replied to that one and said entitlement rots people faster. Then my younger sister messaged me privately and dropped something that changed the entire situation. She said my parents had been telling people I promised to buy them a car and then backed out. That I made commitments and panicked. That I let work get to my head. That was never true. Not once. So now the story wasn't just that I said no. It was that I lied. I confronted my parents that night. I didn't ease into it. I asked them directly why they were telling people I promised something I never agreed to. My mom said she might have implied I was planning to help because she didn't want people thinking they raised someone who wouldn't support his parents. I told her she protected her image by sacrificing mine. She said I was exaggerating and that it was just how conversations went. My dad jumped in and said, "If you didn't want expectations, you shouldn't have started earning." I actually laughed because it was so absurd I couldn't help it. I told him that was the most ridiculous thing I'd heard in my life. He told me if I didn't like how family works, I could leave. So I did. Not permanently, but I stopped visiting. I stopped responding in group chats. I stopped answering indirect questions. I didn't announce it. I just disengaged. That's when they changed tactics. Instead of anger, it turned into concern. Instead of accusations, it turned into worry. People started asking if I was isolating myself, if I was depressed, if I needed support. My mom told someone she was afraid I was pushing everyone away. No one asked why. No one asked what was actually said. They just assumed I was the problem that needed managing. Update 2. After I stopped responding, the narrative shifted from anger to concern. People weren't accusing me anymore. They were checking on me, asking if I was okay, asking if work was stressing me out, asking if I was pulling away from family because of outside influences. That last one showed up in more than one message, which told me exactly where it was coming from. Then my parents stopped talking about the car at all. Instead, they started talking about me. My aunt messaged and asked if I was eating properly. A cousin asked if I was sleeping. Someone else asked if I was still stable at work. None of them mentioned the fight. It was all framed like I was going through some kind of quiet breakdown and they were gently circling me. I finally snapped and replied to one of them, "If you're worried, ask me directly what's wrong instead of guessing." They replied, "We just don't recognize you anymore." That same day, my dad messaged and said we needed to meet, just the two of us, to reset things before they got worse. I agreed because I was done with people talking about me instead of to me. When we met, he didn't bring up the car. He brought up my attitude. He said I'd become cold, that I used to be easy to talk to, and now I acted like everything was an attack. Quick pause before this gets worse. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to like and subscribe. Trust me, it only escalates from here. He said I used to listen, and now I was defensive. I told him listening doesn't mean agreeing to be managed. He said I was interpreting everything as control when it was really just concern. I told him concern doesn't involve calling my workplace, inventing promises, or sending relatives to pressure me. He said I was holding grudges. I told him I was responding to current behavior, not history. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. He said the car wasn't even the main issue anymore. He said the real problem was that I was becoming separate and that once kids start acting independent, families start falling apart. I told him families don't fall apart because someone buys a used car. He said they fall apart when people stop needing each other. That's when I realized this wasn't about transportation or money or upgrades. It was about control shifting and nobody liking it. I told him needing each other and owning each other aren't the same thing. He didn't like that at all. He said I was talking like someone who thought he was smarter than his own parents. I told him I was talking like someone who was tired of being treated like a project instead of a person. He raised his voice and said everything they did was for me, and now I was acting like they were obstacles instead of family. I raised mine right back and told him family shouldn't feel like a debt collector with emotional receipts. That's when he said, "So what, you're just done with us now?" I said, "I'm done being handled." We didn't resolve anything. We just stopped talking in circles and sat in silence until he finally left. that. After that, something changed again. The pressure didn't come from my parents anymore. It came from logistics. They started making plans that assumed my involvement. Family events scheduled because now you can drive. Errands that were perfect since you're free and mobile. Requests phrased like obligations instead of asks. I said no to the first few politely, then less politely, then directly. That's when the comments started shifting from disappointment to accusation again. That I was using my car to avoid them. That I was hiding. That I thought I was better than everyone now that I could leave whenever I wanted. I finally replied in the group chat and said, "You're mad that I can say no now." That set off another round of messages, but this time I didn't engage. I muted the chat and let it burn itself out without me. A few days later, my mom messaged privately and said she felt like she was losing her son and didn't understand why I was pushing everyone away. I replied, "I'm not pushing anyone away. I'm pushing back." She said pushing back hurts people. I said being pushed hurts too. She didn't respond to that. The final blow-up didn't happen in messages. It happened when my parents tried to involve my work again, this time by contacting someone else in my department they vaguely knew through a mutual connection. It didn't go anywhere, but word got back to me again. That was it for me. I went to them and told them if they contacted anyone connected to my job again for any reason that wasn't an emergency, I would stop answering their calls entirely. Not out of anger, out of necessity. My dad said I was threatening them. I said I was setting terms. My mom cried and said I was turning into a stranger. I told her I was turning into an adult who doesn't want his employment treated like family property. That conversation didn't end with yelling. It ended with something colder. My dad said, "Then don't expect us to be there when you need help." I said, "You already weren't helping. You were directing." After that, things didn't explode. They thinned. Invitations slowed. Messages became shorter. Conversations turned careful and distant, like everyone was afraid of setting something off again. I wasn't cut off, but I wasn't pulled in either. And strangely, that's when the car stopped being mentioned completely. Not as a problem, not as a symbol, not at all. What changed instead was how people interacted with me. Less expectation, less assumption, less commentary on what I should be doing next. Not because they agreed with me. The end. Your parents are straight-up emotional loan sharks who think family equals, I get to spend your money and flex your signature whenever I feel like it. You said no to co-signing their ego boost truck, so they turned the whole clan into a WhatsApp smear campaign. He's unstable, ungrateful, having a breakdown. Probably joined a cult because he bought a shitty used car instead of bankrolling dad's midlife crisis. They photographed your car like it's crime scene evidence, lied that you promised them one, then switched to fake concern when the guilt didn't land. Classic narc playbook. Yell lie pity party. We're so worried our baby boy is lost. You didn't abandon family. You stopped being their free ATM with legs. The second you could drive away from their bullshit without asking permission, the control fantasy shattered and they lost their minds. NTA. Not even a little. You're the only one acting like a functioning adult here. Keep the keys, mute the group chat, and drive off into the sunset like the boundary-setting king you are. They'll either adapt or keep crying into their loyalty memes. Either way, not your circus anymore. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite.